Hey guys, my name is Mike Dot, and welcome to MMOHuts' first look for Twin Saga, an anime-themed MMORPG created by X-Legend and published by Aeria Games. Now, if you're familiar with other MMOs such as Grand Fantasista, Eden Eternal, Spirit Tales, Aura Kingdom, or Dragonmon Hunter, then you'll most likely know all about this title since it holds a lot of similarities in terms of visuals, features, and gameplay. Right now, there's a beta available for anyone that has purchased a Founders Pack or was lucky enough to get a closed beta key, which lets you play the game well before the general public. And thanks to the folks at Aeria Games, I was given the opportunity to check out the game during the Founders Beta myself, so without further ado, let's get into this. When starting the game out, players can choose between one of three different classes: the Swordsman for melee-focused DPS, the Mage for magic DPS, or the Gunslinger for ranged DPS. And while that may sound pretty limited for a modern-day MMO, the cool thing here is that players can freely switch between the two other starting classes, as well as unlock 6 other classes as they play, which includes the Hunter, the Paladin, Cleric, Rogue, Berserker, and the Oculus. If you ever played X-Legend's previous MMO, Aura Kingdom, or better yet, if you've ever played Final Fantasy XIV, the class system is very similar. Now, when it comes to actually creating your character, the options available are pretty limited. You can choose between a handful of face types, hairstyles, and 4 skin colors, along with a whole bunch of hair and eye colors. Sadly, there's no face or body sliders available, so expect to run into clones of your own character every now and then. Once your character is made, you'll get sent into the world of Twin Saga by a huge wooden ship and instantly begin a bunch of tutorial quests. Using both the keyboard and mouse, the game uses a very traditional tab targeting control scheme and combat system. You can move around and click on enemies using the mouse, or move around and cycle through enemies using the WASD and tab key. Now, in order to attack, you use various skills laid out on your hotbar using the 1 through 9 keys, and while the number of skills you can bring into battle is limited, the skill cooldowns are set on a very short time limit and have no resources tied to them such as MP, so they can be chained one after another, so the flow of combat feels very fast paced. Now, because of the short cooldowns and no resource management needed to perform skills, I feel that the combat comes off as very accessible for gamers since they don't have to worry about managing any strict skill rotations in order to max out their DPS. And when playing as a melee class, almost all the attacks have some sort of cleave to them, so even if your target is a single enemy with several more all grouped up, your swings will damage all those enemies in range, and same goes for ranged attacks as they tend to have AoE shapes that damage enemies in a straight line or a cone. One neat aspect of Twin Saga's combat is that players can perform ultimate skills, which are these cinematic attacks that can unleash a ton of damage on enemies. Now, to use these attacks, players need to build up an SP meter by performing normal skills, then simply press the F key on a targeted enemy once your SP meter is full. What I like the most about these ultimate skills is that the animations are unique for almost every enemy that I've seen so far, so it was kind of fun to find a new trash mob to fight, just to see what kind of crazy attack I can pull off next. While these attacks are fairly powerful, they can't be abused because not only do you have to build up that SP meter, but the ultimate skills are also on a 30-second global cooldown, and your character is vulnerable during the animation. So whenever you're faced with a large group of enemies and want to use an ultimate skill, you'll have to pick and choose your targets quickly and carefully. So as the game progresses, more and more of the game's story will reveal itself through cutscenes and quest dialogue. And as the main story goes, the world of Twin Saga known as Asteron was created by a god simply known as the Maker, who brought along 2 goddesses to watch over the world using tools called the Calendar of Creation and the Celestial Scale. After thousands of years, it was time to start the calendar over with some new rules, which the 2 goddesses couldn't agree on, so war broke out, and one goddess thought it'd be a great idea to destroy the Celestial Scale and all the power that the goddesses had over the world. But the other goddess used what was left of her powers to let loose a few companions known as Senshi before disappearing into the world. And now you, as the main hero of the story, must track down this goddess while helping those in need and put an end to the evil that plagues the land, as you are the only one that can bring peace to the world of Asteron. But really now, while the main story follows the usual fantasy hero tropes of your character being the chosen one, The cutscenes are fairly decent, and the quest dialogue has a fair amount of tongue-in-cheek humor thrown in, which gives the overall story a decent amount of silliness and seriousness. And while the story isn't going to be winning any awards, it's decent enough to get caught up in every now and then. And speaking of Senshi, Twin Saga has a partner system which allows players to recruit NPCs to assist them in battle. Now these NPCs can be set to auto attack right alongside you, and they have their own special abilities. Some of them can provide healing, others can absorb damage, and others can buff your hero directly. Now with the option to level up your Senshi and unlock new abilities, it's almost like controlling a second character. Now it's a really neat system that makes leveling up very easy, as there's a Senshi for each role in the Holy Trinity. As far as stat customization goes, players can tailor each of their classes to fit their playstyle using a talent system. As each class has its own specific job level, you gain these job points as you use them in combat. Not only that, but the game includes special gemstones that have raw skill or stat boosts tied to them, allowing you to specialize your classes even further. Along with basic equipment upgrades and buff items that can be earned or crafted, there's a ton of different ways to improve your hero. Now it's time for me to talk about one of the biggest features in Twin Saga called the Terra Cottage. Once you reach level 20, players will be granted a special place of their own, which is literally a house that can walk on 4 legs. Once you have access to your Terra Cottage, you can decorate it with a ton of furniture and knickknacks, craft items in your very own workshop, or even grow crops in a garden. There's also merchants to sell you items, an inventory bank to store your stuff, and a ton of other features that will easily make your Terra Cottage your base of operations. But still, what's the point of having a cool house if nobody's around to see what's inside it? Well, you can invite your friends to hang out in your Terra Cottage, as well as give your friends some access to your house along with its resources. So if you're a very social kind of person, you're going to be spending a lot of time here. So now that I got all the main features out of the way, as I get into my overall impressions on the game, I just like to point out that my rule of thumb when it comes to trying out MMOs is to level up all the way to the halfway point of a level cap. So while the game's current level cap is set to level 55, there is a soft cap at level 50 where the endgame content is available, so my final level during the beta was level 25. So from my experience, Twin Saga seems to be a cookie-cutter MMO in terms of its gameplay design, firstly due to a generic quest system which is centered around killing trash mobs, traveling to different locations and collecting items, and then repeating that process over and over again, just like most other MMOs out there. And while the combat system is fast-paced, it gets old quickly because the only real standout gameplay mechanics is the lack of resource management for skills and the flashy ultimate attacks that you can pull off. With the few dungeons that I got to play in, they seemed very linear with trash mobs that were just spread all over the place, and most of which can be ignored, and with the bosses, the boss mechanics were mostly just tank and spank as hard as you can. Now, while I'm certain that the dungeon experience gets better in the later levels, what I experienced when I was leveling up was not very exciting. Now, all of this is very much typical when it comes to X-Legend Games, as they're a development team that has never been one to push the MMO genre forward, which isn't completely a bad thing, because I do believe that not every game needs to reinvent the wheel in order to be fun, but it does mean that what you see is more or less what you get. And speaking of what you see, Twin Saga has a very familiar visual style which features bright and colorful textures and cel-shaded character models to give the game its anime look, which is nice and all, but it looks too similar to the more recent X-Legend games. I personally think if I were to show a screenshot of this title, Dragon Moon Hunter and Aura Kingdom, to a person who's not familiar with these X-Legend games, I wouldn't be surprised if they thought the screenshots were all from the same game, and I personally see that as a bit of an issue. While the character models are different enough, it's the lighting, the texture style, the color palettes, and the creature design that makes each of these games look like they're just clones of each other. Now, it's still a nice looking game, don't get me wrong, but I personally think they could have done something different to make the game look more distinct from its previous titles. And when you get right down to it, the social features in Twin Saga is what I personally feel is the best part about the game, with the Terra Cottage and activities like fishing and world map exploration, which encourages players to just gather up and hang out. So my final thoughts on Twin Saga is that it's very much an average game as far as modern MMOs are. It's not bad by any means, but it doesn't do anything particularly amazing either. So if you've been looking to check out a new anime-themed MMO this year, you can definitely give this one a try, just don't expect to be blown away from it. And with that said, that's all the time I have for this first look. If you'd like to learn more about the games featured in this video, just check out the links in the description below. But don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos similar to this one. This is Mike Dot from MMOHuts saying over and out.